Protests have hit the streets of Romania in recent months amid concerns over the weakening of the judiciary. And today, that controversy hit the European Parliament. Viorica Dăncilă, the country's prime minister, attended the session in Strasbourg with a clear message: show respect for the Romanian people. MEPs discussed the latest reform of the country's judicial system and their impact on the rule of law. Frans Timmermans, the first vice president of the European Commission, had a clear message.
The latest developments are a source of growing concern for the Commission.
He said the situation in the country had deteriorated and called on the Romanian Prime Minister to reverse its judicial reforms. But Dăncilă stressed the popularity of her government and urged MEPs not to interfere.
Nu interziceți României ceea ce este permis în alte state ale Uniunii. Vrem să vă fim parteneri, dar vrem să vă fim parteneri egali.
And joining us now is former Romanian Prime Minister Victor Ponta, is joining us from Bucharest. It's very good to have you with us. I'd like to ask you what the Prime Minister was saying, that the EU should not be interfering. Do you think she has a point?
No, she has not. Good evening. I'm glad to be with you. I mean, Romania, since we joined the European Union, we have a sort of habit to export our internal fights on the European level. But now we are in a very new situation. It's first time when Romanian leaders like Mr. Dragnea and the Prime Minister Dăncilă, they do not accept the judgment, the recommendation of the European Commission and the Parliament. The second new thing is that this time is not anymore just a fight between different political groups. I followed the discussion today, and starting with the Socialist group and Mr. Timmermans, he's belonging to the Socialist family, all the political groups, they have accused the government and in fact the real leadership of the country, Mr. Dragnea, of breaching the rules. And the third new thing, and I'll conclude with this and I'll answer to your question, is that this time we have a political leader in Romania not fighting for his political career like it happened before with previous presidents and prime minister. Mr. Dragnea back in Bucharest is fighting for his freedom. He has been already convicted twice by the Supreme Court, and he's using the government, the Social Democratic Party, the parliament, just to solve his juridical problem. And of course, for this, he needs enemies. European Union, it's the last enemy that Mr. Dragnea found.
Yeah, Mr. Ponta, I mean, the rhetoric that the Prime Minister Dăncilă was using here, it's similar to what Viktor Orban was using last time in Strasbourg. Is there a fundamental difference, do you think, with countries in the eastern part of the EU and maybe here, Brussels, here in the western part, sorry?
There is a fundamental different reason, but the reaction is the same. I mean, it's not an ideological issue like the one in Poland. It's not just an authoritarian leader like Mr. Orban who just wants to rule his country without any European interference. In Romania, there is an authoritarian leader who is facing two verdicts of conviction from justice. So he needs to change the judges, he needs to change the laws. He doesn't have time to wait for the Venice Commission, for the European Commission verdict. And for this, he changed three governments. Mrs. Dăncilă, she's just a puppet prime minister. She's not a real prime minister. She's the third one in 1 year. And this political leader in Romania, it's first time in our history of membership, 11 years of membership, when he not only acted and expressed himself, but also it's trying to put Romania out of the European Union and out of the Romanian European values. This is the real change and the real values, because otherwise internal fights exported on the European stages, we have had a lot.
All right, thank you very much for that, for joining us tonight, former Romanian Prime Minister Victor Ponta. They're talking to us from Bucharest. All right, I'll bring it to the panel. Elmer, you know Victor Ponta. You know the situation in Romania. We're talking about the rule of law. It's been watched by the EU since 2007. Now it's 2018, and nothing has changed?
No, it was going in the right direction, but now the leader of the Socialist Party, who is fighting some laws and the judicial system because he was convicted twice because of corruption, is moving it backwards. And that is the point. Therefore, Commissioner Timmermans clearly said, go back on track. to complete it. We have not to see that it must be perfect from the very beginning. Such countries need time for reforms, but this is it goes in a different direction. It's always the same thing, like in Hungary, like in Poland, that Europe has the right to stick to the principles of the rule of law and democracy in a country. If these principles would have not been fulfilled, they would not become members of the European Union. And now they cannot say we move away from that, then if we would have said that
so
in 2007...
should Europe be worried that there's a bigger rift? Like, you know, it's not just one country, it's several. Do you think there's a bigger rift, that it's moving away from, as you say, the values of Europe?
I think it needs perhaps a generation. In some of these countries, people do not understand that a majority in parliament does not mean everything. A majority in the parliament can do anything. There is the right of the minority in parliament, in the population, and the supremacy of courts and constitutional courts in several questions. It's the limitation of power.
Isn't that the key point, that we find populists everywhere? Populism is not confined to Eastern Europe. We find it in Marine Le Pen and in whole loads of parties in Western Europe. The problem is that actually democracy and the European way of doing things is relatively new in these Eastern European countries.
Sorry.
Well, it is.
No.
These were behind the Iron Curtain for the best part of 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
So
I said that.
Yeah, I know. So that this is relatively new to them, and aren't they allowed to make mistakes along the way?
That is not a mistake. That is a brutal will to have power against the rules. And they know it perfectly well. I know all three of them very well in these three countries.
Yep, right.
And they have to accept that democracy under the rule of law means that you have to accept a limitation of power. It's a very principal point. And without these points, you would not have become member of the European Union.
Right. It's not just actually countries in Eastern Europe, because we also have another country
at
who's
the
going
moment
against...
to change the judicial law, it's only countries there.
Right,
but Salvini might do it. Says Le Pen is not in power.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going next, because Italy's new budget promises somehow cut taxes